Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 107. Identity Left. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford, and today we're talking about the story told in the television series Severance. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm recovering from a cold, so folks may hear that I'm slightly congested, but other than that, doing just fine. And what's new in your writing world?
New in my writing world, I sent out my monthly newsletter.
I got it.
Yeah, thanks. And promising to have the book published this week. And then I went to publish and Amazon had blocked my book. So
why?
I don't know. I think maybe it was they said it was because I had a pre-order that passed. I don't know why that would block your book. I couldn't do any updates.
Well, they won't let you do any more pre-orders for a year after that if you miss a pre-order.
Yeah, I thought that was the only consequence. So that was the reason they gave. I'm not sure that's what it was.
Interesting. Were you trying to do a pre-order?
I had but
this time when you tried to upload it this week.
No, I couldn't do anything. It wouldn't let me edit the book at all.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was just stuck there. So I've been going back and forth with their customer service. So hopefully it works out. I don't know. I had to do some kind of shenanigans, deleting stuff, re-adding stuff, relinking stuff. Hopefully this works. I don't know. But if all goes well, I should be able to get that out today or tomorrow.
All right. I wish you luck.
Yeah, thanks. I may need it.
By the time folks hear this problem should be resolved and the book should be available on Amazon. So folks can go look for that. And you can definitely find it on Mike's website, which the link is in the show notes. So if you want to know the status of getting that book uploaded, the book 2 in the Tales of Zara, check out Mike's website. So, yay. Good.
All right. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. Been an adventure. What about you?
Sleeping. Lots and lots of sleeping.
Sleep is good.
Yep. I've been trying to do things and then I get tired and I sit down and I fall asleep. Actually, today's the day I have actually felt like I have some energy today. So that feels really good. So I'm going to take care of some things that have been put off and hopefully be done with this cold and get back into what needs to be done and all things book writing.
Nice. Yeah. Hopefully you're turning around.
Yeah. Well, I do. I feel a lot better today. A lot better today.
That's good. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to let your body rest.
Exactly. The rest is the best cure. So anyway, so what interesting stories have you come across lately in books, movies, or television?
Let's see. I have been watching the Apple TV show called The Studio.
Oh, I heard about that. How is it?
I'm really enjoying it. It's very amusing, sort of this frenetic pace to it. I don't know. I find it very entertaining. It's Seth Rogen plays this character who works for a movie studio, and he's always in way over his head. He's trying to do the right thing, the artistic thing, things like this, and the industry keeps beating him down. I don't know. It's entertaining. It's not super deep. It's just a fun show. So I've been watching that, enjoying that. And then I've been watching the latest season of Invincible, which is a superhero, supervillain story, much more adult, very violent, and a lot of gore and things like that. But yeah, interesting storylines. Those are the things I've been watching. Okay. Haven't been reading anything right now yet. Yeah, that's where I'm at. What stories have you been checking out?
I am still slowly but surely enjoying my comfort read of The Lord of the Rings, since you know it so well, you don't have to read a whole lot of it, right? I just read a couple of pages and then put it down, and it's been really nice. And while I've not been feeling well, I actually have found myself binging, of all things, NCIS. I know, very strange. That's not really my thing either, right? Because there's a little too much gore in that show for me, and I much prefer the episodes that have like political intrigue and international intrigue. I like those episodes.
Yeah.
So I don't like the angsty episodes. I just skip those or fast forward through the angsty stuff. I don't know. Are you familiar with the series?
No, I've never seen an episode.
It's your pretty typical crime television show. There's a crime committed, and then the team figures it out, and they all bring something to the table, and they've got a strong leader, and they've all got their own relationships. It's the character piece that I think really works for this show. They really develop the characters well, and they have them interact well. It's very thoughtful how they do it, and it's very engaging.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Strange thing for me to watch while I'm sick, but I turn it on and fall asleep to it. Excellent. Because it's very very predictable.
Yeah.
They're very formulaic, so I think that's probably what it has been. So, yeah. Are you ready to talk about Severance?
Yes, I am.
Today we're talking about the story told in season 1 of the television show Severance, and I'm going to read the synopsis that comes up when you type Severance into Google. Mark leads a team of office workers whose memories have been surgically divided between their work and personal lives. When a mysterious colleague appears outside of work, it begins a journey to discover the truth about their jobs. Do you enjoy this TV show?
Oh yeah, I love this show. This is super weird show, but to me, it's wonderfully weird show. I watched it when it first aired, and so much time had passed since the end of that first season that when I rewatched it, I remembered very little of what happened. So it was like watching it anew almost. And it was cool. I really enjoyed watching it the second time. Even though, once I got into it enough, I kind of, remembered things that were going to happen. And of course, I knew how it ended, the first season we're talking about here. And I think one thing they do really well is something that we've discussed in other shows and movies and stories, where the writers introduce us to the world that they set up by having one of the characters also get introduced to it. In this case, the character of Helly.
Yeah.
She goes through what we all likely would in that situation, which is horror, right? At being trapped in this weird world that she's found herself in, and trying to learn what's going on and trying to escape it. And her reaction felt very relatable, while the behavior of the other characters didn't, right? Like the other characters, Mark and the others, felt really weird, like they're brainwashed or robotic. They'd already been consumed by this system to the point where they almost didn't feel like normal people anymore. And Helly's introduction is great, not only for introducing us to the world, introducing us to those characters, but also starting to break those characters out of the routine and the rut that they've been in. So I thought they did that really well. And even though a lot of characters act strangely at the start, as we get to know more of them, more of the innies, as they call them in particular, you start to care about them, actually, or I did, and empathize with them, because it is a terrible situation, right? And Helly shows us how horrible that would be. And you realize they're kind of stuck in there against their will. They're slaves essentially in this world. Even when they try to get out, they can't. And I think we can empathize with that. And each of them has their own plight that they're dealing with, which we can also relate to. And I don't think the show would work at all if there was no concern for the characters. If they remained the way they were at the start of the show, it would just be weird. And that would be the end of it. Right? It would be interesting because it's weird, but you wouldn't feel for them like you do by the end of the show, by the end of the first series or first season. And you really want them to either escape or at least learn a little bit more about what's going on, because they don't know anything about the outside world. It's such a weird concept. And you really want that for them. You want them to know what's going on with who they are in the outer world. It's a really interesting setup. I would never have come up with this idea, I don't think. So from that perspective alone, it really intrigues me. But I love the way that they unveil the mystery and get you to actually care about these weird people over the course of the first season. I also think what works really well is the people who are set up as antagonists to the main characters, specifically Miss Cobell and Milchick. And then, of course, there's the mysterious board, whatever that is, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, but we don't really see them. So most of what we see is Milchick in particular. And that guy, he's just so unlikable. And the actor who plays him just does such a great job. He feels so unnatural, and his reactions, his behavior, his emotions seem so inhuman. It's just really bizarre and off-putting, and it makes you really not like that guy. So I think they did a really good job with that. I think that the growing character relationships are also good, with the friendship, blooming into almost a relationship between Mark and Helly. And we see that with Irving and Bert, who's from the O&D department, which is also really, it's just so much weird stuff. I really hope they have a plan.
Don't lose the thread.
Yeah, they have a plan for this. I don't want it to be like Lost, where it's like they just keep coming up with new weird stuff and none of it really connects. It's just they're making up, something that seems weird and fun at the time. I'm hoping this stuff connects together at some point. The other thing that I should mention is the pacing, because the pacing of this is very measured and deliberate. And normally I would think it's too slow, but because it's a show that forces you to think about what's going on and wonder what's happening, you really put yourself in the position of these characters. For me, it works because it engages your brain. It's not just slow for the sake of being slow. It's slow, giving you time to figure out what's going on and think about what's happening and feel what it's like to be these characters in this situation. And then I just found the pacing in the last couple of episodes should just be fantastic. The build up to the suspense of the moment of, are they going to get out, and how that's going to play out, and when they do awaken in their Audis universe, how they handle it. You're just, I don't know. It's like you're just like, say something. Especially with Mark, it's like, come on, man, say what's going on. It's just a really good suspenseful end to the season, I thought. I don't know. It's a very good wrap up, and it leaves us on edge more. At least me. I know you didn't like it as much, so I'm curious to see hear your thoughts on this. And but first, before we talk about what could be improved, what did you like about this story, and what did you think about my thoughts on it?
I think your thoughts are really, really good. And there are some things, of course, I disagree with you about. But I think what's really interesting is that the things that I disagree with you about, I think are very personal in nature, as in from my own personal perspective, as opposed to related to the story. But when we get into it, we can examine that a little bit more closely. I agree with you 100% that they did a brilliant job getting us invested in the characters. I actually really enjoyed this up to a point. And then I started to not enjoy it. And we can talk about why in a moment. And I think part of that was that they did manage to get us engaged in the characters and care about what's going to happen to them. Of course, our immediate concern is Helly, even though she's not the first person we're introduced to. We're introduced to Mark first. And the first time we see Mark, he's weeping in his car. So we're trying to figure out what his story is. And of course, I'm thinking he doesn't want to go to work.
Yeah, I think that's relatable to a lot of people.
Right, because who does, right? So you can get invested with him as well. So I do agree. I think they did a terrific job with the characters, and they did it in a very sparse way. And that's something that you see throughout this entire series. The series is rich with details about what's going on, which I also enjoyed. There are a lot of little Easter eggs, lots of little clues here and there, but it's also a very sparse show, very minimalistic in both the sets and how our characters are engaged with. We only get to see very small pieces of them.
Yeah.
But we somehow still get invested in them. And I think that's really well done. I got to say, I really enjoy. You were talking about how Helly seemed to be the most real, whereas the other three, when she enters her department, didn't seem real. And I thought they did a wonderful job of blending sort of reality and what feels almost like caricature or two-dimensionality. You know, like Helly did a good job. She did a good thing in her job. And so she gets a 5-minute disco dancing reward. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? And so it does kind of reflect on social. I've never seen The Office. I know I'm probably the only person on the planet who's never seen it, but I've seen stuff from it. And I seem to recall that, like in memes and stuff, this kind of crazy stuff existed there too, only played for humor.
Yeah. It's not as weird.
Right. But this is the same kind of stuff played for creepy.
Yeah.
And I thought they did a really good job of sort of blending that sort of who's real and who's not, and what's a caricature and what's made up and what's part of the facade and what's not. And I think what happened is that we had Helly and these three characters who appeared to be part of the facade, who then slowly emerged as real for us. Yeah. And I thought that was just really well done. Really well done. I loved all the details. I did spend some time trying to figure out what was going on based on the details. And I enjoyed the mystery of the various things that were going on. There were lots of things that I enjoyed about this. I have to say I got most engaged, and I think everybody who listens to the podcast knows this is not a spoiler-free zone. We do put a spoiler warning at the beginning, but in case you just jumped right here to this part, there is going to be spoilers here. I got really engaged when Irving saw the black ooze.
Yeah.
I was like, what is that? That's cool. Something's bleeding over into his reality. What is it? And I was like, that's when I got really engaged. Okay, what's going on here? And so I was very much engaged in that mystery. And I also was very convinced that Helly was a member of the anti-severance resistance group and that she had become severed in order to get in and upheave the company from within. I was wrong.
Yes. Yes, you were.
This is what we liked about the show. Let's talk about what we might have changed as a writer. Did you have anything that you might have changed as a writer?
That's a good question. I found this show hard to criticize because I think all the elements work so well together, and I don't know where it's going in the first season. I mean, if I knew kind of like, if let's assume that there's a plan for this and they have a sense of how this is going to work out and what these things mean, then if I knew that, maybe I would have more critique on how they could set things up differently. But I'm just kind of going along with the weird stuff and assuming it has a point because we just don't know at this point what some of this stuff is. We do learn some of the things like the black ooze. We get a hint of what that is. So there's things like that. But I do worry that they're setting up things like, oh, there's these scary numbers. It's like, what does that mean? How does that connect to anything? So we'll have to see how that plays out. One thing I noticed that was at the end in the last episode, I think, it was the last episode where Mark is his innie is in his Audi's life, right? And he's there with his sister. Yeah. It was just, there was a good infuriating suspense there of like, do something, right? I would have had him press a little harder with his sister because it just didn't seem reasonable. He has this opportunity and he's just kind of being almost
and he doesn't know how long it's going to be. Yeah.
And he's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, she has to take care of this thing. I'll let her go take care of that thing. It's like, I would have made him at least press a little harder with his sister. No, we need to talk right now, and still have her leave because she sees her issue as more important in that moment because she doesn't know what's up. I think you could have still had it play out the same, but have him be a lot more active and pressing and
a little bit more agitated.
Yeah, it would have made it more realistic because he's like, oh, what's going on here? Let me just, it's like, come on, dude. That's not how he would have reacted, I think, at that point. So that's one thing I noticed. I'm trying to think about some other stuff. I'm sure there are other things. If I watched it a third time, I would pick up on. But that was the one thing that really stood out to me on the second watch. I know you have a lot more issues, so I'm curious to hear what things you would improve. Like, how would you go about improving?
Okay, well, first of all, for the record, you tricked me into watching a horror show. So heads up, everyone who's not seen this. This is a horror show. Seems like it's a thriller, but it's a psychological horror thriller. From a writing perspective, the biggest question I had that was never answered to my satisfaction, and this is maybe just a me thing. Why would people take this job? I thought Mark's reason, because I wanted to forget about the death of my wife, was flimsy. I think that people who take this job should be really incredibly compensated, right? There should be money coming out of their ears. They should be living in mansions to do this. It did not make sense to me why someone would take this job. And I was waiting for that to see what the reward was for the risk. And there really wasn't one. So that kind of felt unreasonable to me.
Oh, that's a good point, because yeah, you're right. It's like on the outside, it was just like you're going to a normal job.
Yeah.
You're getting compensated, and you have no idea what's going on there. And you're cutting part of your brain off.
Right. And so I think if they had there be some kind of really extraordinary reward for taking the job, that would have made it seem more realistic to me. And like I said, even though I don't want to think about my wife all day at my job, at work, that still didn't feel reasonable to me. Mark had other options, right? He was a professor at a university. Universities have leave, they have hiatuses, they have things that you can do to take care of yourself. Their people are really well taken care of. So why couldn't he just take time off to get the help that he needed to deal with his grief? He has a sister. He could have moved in with her. And, it didn't make sense to me. And so I would have loved to have seen something bigger.
Yeah, I think even if if you leave it as is, I think they could have made it so that it was presented to him as this is something that will help you get over the grief. We've done X number of studies with people, and it's like 90% of these people, manage their grief and become better within a year, 2 years, or whatever. And it's like, if it was presented that way, as like this is a solution to your problem, not a way to mask it, then I think that maybe would have been a little bit more powerful.
But how about everybody else? I think there needed to be, when we...
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's another question, is what are these other characters doing there?
Right. So that was one thing. The other thing is, and you said you enjoyed the pace, and I actually did not. And here's why. I think there's probably, and I don't know if anybody's ever studied this, because I'm not a mystery writer or a thriller writer per se. I put thriller stuff and mystery stuff in my stories, but I bet there is some kind of ratio between breadcrumbs given, then the mystery solved, and then new breadcrumbs given, or a mystery solved. When you're pulling somebody along in a mystery, you have to give the watcher or a reader an opportunity for them to engage their own brain, so they're in problem-solving mode themselves. They're trying to solve the mystery. And so you got to give them enough where they can start solving the mystery, and then either show them how they were wrong or show them how they were right and give them a new mystery. Small little bursts of solutions along the way to keep them engaged. And that didn't happen for me. There wasn't enough of this little mystery is solved and now there's this new mystery to kind of keep me going. It was just the big mystery. And I started to get bored because it was just sort of the same old, same old. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, and they could have addressed that, like you said, have little things sort of come up and be resolved over the course of the season.
And instead, what they did do, which of course is where it becomes very personal to me, is give us evidence of creepiness and horror, which I'm not into. So then that's when I was like,
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about it that way. I didn't see it as horror at all. So that's a totally different take for me.
Okay, tell me.
And for me, I guess I was looking at it as sort of a character story. Like, what are these characters going to do? How are they going to evolve and grow out of this? It is kind of like Lost. Did you ever see Lost?
No. It started with a plane crash. That put me off.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that in the sense that there's this balance between character development and weird mystery stuff that pops up. And sometimes it goes too much one way and not enough the other. And I think some people are looking for more of one and some people are looking for more of the other, right? Depends on depends on, every individual, how you're coming at it.
Exactly.
So I appreciate the mystery stuff, and I hope they resolve that. But I was willing to go along with them because I wanted to see how the characters are just so weird at the start. It's like, are they going to be like this way through the whole show? It seems so odd, and then you start to see cracks in that shell, that mask of who they were, and you start to see them wanting more and wanting their own answers, and it's like, I can get behind that now.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, that was kind of what was driving it.
And I think this goes to just kind of is a case in point where I am not the target audience for this show, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's gonna be good for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not the target audience for NCIS, probably.
I'm not sure I am either, but I think it's good to expand, my palette to see what's out there. I'm glad I watched it so that I can kind of understand what's got people excited about it. And there are some really brilliant things about it. I probably won't be watching season 2.
Oh yeah, we'll watch season 2, and we'll do that episode by episode.
All right, so themes. Did you come up with any themes for Severance?
I think there are a number of things going on here. If we look at the different characters and kind of where they're going, for me, I think one of the main themes, if we follow Mark along, I think Helly sort of introduces us to the world, and I think she makes the show work. I think she's a great character, especially how it turns at the end. But Mark is obviously the main character that we're following along. So if I'm looking at it from Mark's perspective, I think it's something along the lines of, you can't just shut pain off from your life without significant repercussions, right? You have to deal with, pain and grief, and not just try to shut it away and hide from it. That's what I got.
Okay. I actually struggled with theme myself. I really did. And I kind of was looking at it from a more of a 30,000 foot level of what it meant for everyone and the entire concept of Severance and how this was playing out for the entire show. And the only thing I really came up with was the importance of transparency. And it kind of dovetails with your comment about, having to deal with pain and grief. Hiding it from yourself is not being transparent with yourself. And there needed to be, honesty and transparency across the board in every layer of this show. Every layer we see, with every person, there wasn't honesty and transparency. So that's kind of what I pulled from it.
No, that's a good insight, because you're right. We see that from Cobell and Milchick and the board. They're doing their own thing and not really telling people what or why.
Oh, by the way, and I agree with you. The actor who plays Milchick is brilliant. He's got such an amazing range.
Oh yeah, he just nails that character. Yeah. They did a perfect casting for that guy. He's just so creepy. Yeah.
So as a writer, what do you take away from Severance?
I think for me, my big takeaway is it comes back to characters. I think you have to make sure you get your readers to care about your characters. In this case, empathy is very powerful. I think we get that with Helly right off the start. We can understand and empathize with her being in such a horrible position. Not so much with the other characters initially. Like you said, we see Mark crying in his car, but we don't really know what's going on there. But it gets revealed over the course of the season. And similarly with the other characters, we start to relate to them more. So for me, that's what drew me along. The weirdness is fun and interesting and engaging, but if that's all it had been, I wouldn't have cared about it by the end of the season. So that's my takeaway.
Okay, that's good. My takeaway is also about the characters, relatable characters. I agree with you. I think the relatability of these characters is what really makes this show shine and work. Also the details. There are some really amazing details. It was disappointing to me that we didn't get some of the mystery solved because there are so many details. There's clearly a well-developed universe in this series. Somebody spent a lot of time and thought into crafting every single element. And I appreciated that and really enjoyed that. And that's something that I love digging into those kinds of details and seeing what everything means and kind of connecting the dots. And so I really appreciated that. The takeaway I take from my sort of ratio of breadcrumbs to small bursts of solved mystery is something that I would want to take into myself. Just maintain that. If I'm writing, when I'm writing a mystery, when I'm writing something that has a mystery involved, make sure that I solve a mystery, but create a new one for my reader to keep them going. Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in Severance, Season 1. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters and all our subscribers. We're so grateful for your support and your encouragement. The Stories Told podcast is available on multiple podcast platforms, and we thank you for liking and subscribing or following, depending on where you're listening. It may not be a big deal to you, but it means a lot to us. If you have a favorite book, movie, or TV series you'd like to suggest for the podcast, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, and that link is in the show notes. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com, and those links are also in the show notes. Join us next time as we take things a little lighter, and we talk about the story told in the movie The Princess Bride. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.